Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I'm here today to bring you an interview with the one, the only Carly Robbins. Now, I will have to say there will be a slight spoiler alert if you don't want to know anything about Carly's pen names, but if you already know and you're already okay with that, you should be more than prepared to watch this interview. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this interview so much. I enjoyed interviewing Carly. She's absolutely amazing. And without further ado, let's kick it back to Past Charles. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I have one of my favorite narrators here today on my channel. I have the one, the only Carly Robbins, and we're here to learn everything about there is Carly. How are you doing today to start us off?
I'm doing wonderful. I am in Brooklyn, New York. We finally have a nice day of weather. So it is beautiful outside. I feel like springtime, summer's right around the corner. It can't honestly get any better than it is right now. And thank you so much for having me.
And my first question for you is how did you get into first narrating audiobooks, and then specifically, because you're a big name in romance, how did you stumble into that genre?
Great question. So I had moved to New York because I wanted to be a stage actress. I grew up actually doing musical theater, and it's as a little side tangent, I find actually a lot of Broadway or people who have had an experience or exposure singing as their background do really great in voiceover in general, because I think that it's such an intimate medium. It's just you, right, and your microphone. Here's my microphone. I moved it out of the way. But you have to sort of have a really intimate relationship with the microphone, and how your voice sounds in general conversation isn't what it's going to be like on the microphone. And then also really subtle changes in your vocal tone, or just having the facility of your instrument is so important. And so I find singers or people who have that kind of background, just inherently, it's in their bones to sort of understand how their voice sits in their body. I just find that more often than not, you'd be like, oh yeah, you sang when you were younger, right? Kind of thing. It's just interesting. That's a little side note. Okay. So I moved to New York because I wanted to be a stage actor. I was very serious, and I wanted to do very important, hold the mirror up to society plays. And as I'm sure most people who are actors say, it's really hard to make a living as an actor, certainly in a very expensive city like New York City. And so, like everybody, you come up with all different kinds of jobs to fill in the holes, to make a living and to pay your rent. And that can be exhausting. You have 3 or 4. I was a coat check girl. I worked at Kaplan. Oh my goodness. Talk about on the phone. I would sell people all their PSAT and SAT classes. That's so funny. So I'd be the call-in boy. They had a national number, and so I would help, and then you'd find out based on their zip code, and you would talk about all stuff and sell them different packages. So it was sales, perfect for a voice actor. Coat check girl in really, really fancy restaurants in New York. So you would see all types of celebrities, some behaving badly, some very, very sweet, and then hope that you got nice tips when people paid in cash. So I kind of cobbled together somewhat of a career, but it didn't really feel like I was making a lot of forward steps, that I could count on things, that the work was continuously happening. I would go long periods where I would just, auditions wouldn't happen for things. And I was sort of thinking I was at a crossroads. I had written and produced a couple of things that on my own that, and had done some short films, and sort of felt a little exhausted from that experience, but also really fulfilled as an artist. And then I was kind of just sort of feeling what am I going to do now? Because felt like I had done a lot of the things I had wanted to accomplish, didn't really feel like I was as far as I wanted to be. And so maybe I needed to put some seeds in place to make a turn. And so I was having lunch with the wife of a friend of a friend. And I'm not even really sure why we wound up, because we were not close. And I'm not really clear why we wound up at this lunch together, but it honestly changed the course of my life. And during this lunch, as we were just sort of catching up, and she was like, I think you'd be really great at audiobooks. Do you have any desire to do that? I know this guy who's just got tons of work, and he would hire you in a second. And I was like, she's not in the industry. So I was thinking, like, what does she possibly know? And I was like, okay,
No.
I'll take his number. Sure, no problem. Right?
Yeah.
Like a scam. Like, is he going to make me sign up for something where I'm going to have to pay like thousands of dollars,
Dollars.
get a demo, which happens a lot. And then you're like, I feel like something bad just happened and I'm not sure what it was,
Was.
but I may be too embarrassed to say something. So I'm just going to pay my money, maybe. I feel like that happened. Every actor has a story like that. Anyway, I took his name and information, and he was like, okay, like, who's this girl? I've never heard of her. Is she really an actor? Has she even taken an acting class? And he was like, check out this thing. It just it's only been around for a short time. ACX, it's part of Audible, and let's see how you do, and maybe we'll set up some time you can come see me at my studio. And I was like, oh, okay. So of course I mad dash went to ACX and I was like, what is this thing? And it was in its infancy stages. So it was not the like millions of people that are on it now. And I was like, oh my God, there's auditions and things. And oh, this is so cool and interesting. And I didn't even realize that audiobooks could be like this. And it was because Audible had started this platform. They were, had just been bought in the years, not very many years previously, to Amazon. And because of that, their technology and exposure and everything just kind of exploded. So they have this platform, and I met with this guy. His name is Pete Rowan, and he runs a production company in New York City. And at the time, Audible was doing a ton of back titles. So they just basically spent tons of money just to get everything. So they would have so much content on their site. And so he would get like a big book dump and then start casting people. So your chances, you're not up against like everybody in the world. And at this point, authors didn't know that they could, if they probably didn't even have in their contracts that they could request people, or they weren't sort of their own industries. All this was kind of in the beginning. And so he would just cast me. And I just immediately started working. And I was like, does anybody else know how incredibly
this is going on?
Awesome this is? And I think it takes a particular kind of personality, because you're sitting for hours and hours, you're doing voices, it's a lot of character work. But what I found was it was probably the closest I had found to doing a play, which is what I originally fell in love with. It's a lot of subtext. So as you're reading a dialogue, you're like, what does this person want? What am I trying to get out of them? I've got to get them to go with me on this date. I've got to get them to, help, find justice for my dad, or whatever you're reading. And so it just all of a sudden, it like clicked in a whole different way for me as an actor to fulfill those kinds of things that I felt like I had been lacking on a consistent basis. And so him, and then ACX, and then I just started booking, and then I started making friends with authors. And then I was like, this is an entrepreneur's dream. If you have the wherewithal, the curiosity to learn this craft, then the world is sort of your oyster, because there are not enough people in this space, because it takes so much energy and endurance to sit and contain yourself, and then to also have the endurance to sit and tell a story over a certain number of days and keep it consistent and keep it like alive and have the same sort of energy, and remember the voice that you did on page 3 and that person doesn't show up again until the end. And then you learn those lessons like, oh, I got to keep a little voice file of who that character was to know that they come back again.
Yeah.
And to do your prep work so you don't find out that they have an accent on page 90 when you started them on page 3. How dare it? Let me ask you something. You as a reader would be reading that, so shame on the author for not including, like, you had a whole character built up in your head. When you read, do you talk in your head as you're reading it?
Mm-hmm.
I do
For
too.
dialogue, I do.
I do too. My husband doesn't do that. And I was like, what do you mean you don't do that? I was like, so then how are you reading things in your head? And he's like, I don't understand what you mean. And I...
It's like the whole, if you can imagine, like, have a visual map. Like, some people can't do that while they're reading. I'm like,
can't do that.
I was like, what do you see when you read?
You have like a narrator voice in your head, like imagining how that whole thing is, and that's why he's not an actor, I think. I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with. Isn't that interesting? I didn't know that people, I mean, all right, of course, obviously, people's brains, everybody's brains work differently. So that's a very long answer to your question, but that's how I started. And it like excited me so much. And I was getting so much artistically out of the experience of narrating. And then I started like through people hearing that they were like fans. And then you would get requested, and I'm like, people are actually hearing me? Like the whole thing just blew my mind. And one would think that sounds really silly that I wouldn't know that, because obviously I'm being hired for a job that people are listening to. But as an actor, you're like in your little quiet space doing it by yourself, and you have no idea once it gets out into the world and lives that anybody's actually going to listen to the art that you're putting out there. And so that's how that happens. That's my origin story. And then I just started diving in, and then it's you meet more publishers, you meet more casting, you meet more narrators, sometimes you get invited to author events. I happen to be in New York, so sometimes they're doing events and they like you. And I've been able to do that with one of my authors. We've become really nice friends. Amy Popel, she writes more fiction, not romance, and her books are sensational. And we would do like readings for her book release party. So she would read like
That's
one,
so cool.
yeah, really, really sweet. Yeah. And make me feel like this tiny, tiny, tiny part of her experience of becoming an author and sharing her words. And then I get to perform them in front of the people that care about her. And it's just very cool.
Oh, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
do you find that now, since audiobooks are so prolific, especially in the romance genre, do you find that you have more authors like saying like, I want Carly to do this audiobook. I wrote this character with you in mind to
Can you
do this,
imagine
to narrate the audiobook.
when I get requested, because sometimes I'll, narrate authors, depending on, because it winds up being like a business as well as kind of art. So it's complicated how the work comes to you. But when I get an email that says somebody requested you for X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this person. How did they hear of me? Like, it still surprises me every single time. Yes. The answer to that is yes. It surprises me, and it's so gratifying. And sometimes I get to have like an email relationship with the author. A lot of times I don't, but in those chances where I do, it's always just so fun to know that we can make that connection together, and so it's just incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
And two, it's been really interesting watching what's happening in the romance genre because I feel like the different genres for audiobooks and the fan base is very different. Where I feel
totally.
like in romance, narrators are becoming even just as, or not even more important than authors. So, like, a lot of listeners are like, I want this narrator. I will listen to anything that she
Anything that they
narrates.
do, I know. It's
How's that has changed for you from when
yeah.
you started your career up until now? Do you find that you're getting more fan interactions where people are like, "I love XYZ
Yeah,
audiobook that you did," or like,
you know,
"I'll only listen to like books you narrate. I
I
don't care who
know.
the author is."
Do you know what's so funny? I mean, it's hard to I'm going to try and put this in a way that makes sense. So when I started, I was just excited to get any job. But as you start to grow in your career and you get requests, or you're working exclusively with an author and you do all of their books, or you become really attached to certain characters, or maybe you don't get the next book for whatever reason, you don't know.
Mhm,
Sometimes they decide, it's in the same world, but they keep the male narrator, because a lot of male narrators get a lot more passes than the female narrators who get beaten up a lot. And then it feels like there's more at stake. And so there's more at stake. So what was maybe easier in the beginning, surprisingly, feels a lot more complicated. The longer you get into it, you feel like you are maybe trying to get more relevant, or you don't want to lose the hold of your fans, or you don't want to disappoint, or you don't want to not try and get the bigger jobs to get names out there for newer listeners. So it's complicated. You would think it would maybe be a little easier and you could just sort of bask in it and enjoy it. And I'm not sure that I've had that experience. That's not to say that I don't enjoy all of those things, because that's awesome. But I think along with that, you feel like you still want to stay relevant, and you still want to get cast, and you still want great work. Um, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue into my next question.
Tell me.
Especially now that Audible has become has like such a chokehold on the audiobook
Right.
industry, and now you're starting to see a lot more indie like Blue Nose,
Yeah.
Pink
Yeah.
Flamingo, Lyric Audio. Are you seeing like a different like types of books that are coming across your table than you would have seen when you first started from especially from indie authors?
Totally. So most of the projects that I get cast in now for Audible are their Audible Originals, which is I think what they're
Mhm,
actually leaning more towards. So once they sort of moved through that previous iteration of their company where they were just buying up the rights for everything just to have their name and to have content on their site to attract as many subscribers as possible. I think they probably, rightly so, because they're a business, felt like they needed to have more ownership of those kinds of things and to collaborate with authors and to how are we going to keep being at the head of the audio format because podcasts are big. A lot of
mhm.
these sort of like storytelling devices for true crime is really big, especially for women. Surprisingly, there's like a
Oh,
marriage
really?
between like romance, yeah, and true crime. I'm not sure where it comes from. I've heard a couple people that I've listened to, and I can't remember now who said it, but that they think because women have this sort of like, they're always sort of like protective of themselves against men and violence, that it's very titillating for them to listen to true crime because it's like they're never going to actually be in that, but maybe it gives them some like tools of things to be
Like
aware
some
of.
security.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. But anyway, that's a side note. So I most of those projects are things like they're wildly different. So like I did this children's Audible original called Spies. It was so much fun. That the author was Scott Merriman, and there was like a whole cast of actors, and they were doing like these crazy outlandish things, and I was the narrator, and it was about spies in history, and
Mhm.
this one happened to focus on women and sort of their role in times of war, things like that, where they were so like that's a really interesting project that's not a book, that's not tied
Mhm.
to like a series or me solo narrating. That was a very collaborative project and that was super exciting. So I think Audible has kind of moved away from those kinds of things.
Mhm.
But the indie market, especially as the rise of authors has come about and they've become their own businesses, each of these
Mhm.
women and sometimes men are putting out 10 books a year and they've got fan pages and publicity stuff and they're doing events and they've become more in charge. They're not dependent on the gatekeepers like publishers and other things to get their work out. They can go directly to their fans. I think along with that, right? They're finding the narrators that can complement that work. And
Mhm.
so I think it's kind of like grown together. Although for a narrator, right, we still have to wait for somebody else to give us the art to put out there. So, so we're still kind of the lowest ones on the totem pole. So I think it's for sure changing. And then to add on top of that, narrators that become so in demand that authors will go because they've retained their rights or whatever their reasons are they want to be in charge of their own production. They will reach out to us narrators themselves. I get I don't even know how many a year people who want me to do that. And I know for a lot of narrators that get that a lot more because they're so big in the indie world that they were like, I need to have my own production company because now I'm getting so many and I'm not always right for those roles and nor do I have the time and maybe I can make my own business out of it. And it's fascinating and so inspiring to watch my fellow creators and I love working with all of them because they come from the narrator background so they know how to run a project and how to make life easier for you as you're getting information and then you're also like supporting your friends so you're always kind of working with your friends a little bit and so that's awesome. So that is for sure changed because I don't think that having that kind of ownership over your art existed even just a few years ago.
Mhm.
So yeah. So like support the independence for the people that you love and it's the fans. That's the only reason they
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about getting so many indie production companies, we're getting so many new authors
Yeah.
and new voices coming to audio, and I was like, wait, 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 wait. It's like the wait time between an author who just started and when they started getting like high quality audiobooks,
I know.
because a lot of these audiobook production companies are started by narrators, the quality is off the charts where like it's very interesting. Like traditionally published audiobooks versus indie published
I
audiobooks,
know.
they're indistinguishable now. Like
They
you
are.
can't tell. And
And I
sometimes
think
the indie titles are higher produced, like Real by Kennedy Ryan is a great example.
I think that I think that there is a window of time that has now opened for creators to have so much more control over their art that if they have the time and the sort of like passion in their hearts to devote to developing their art, that the world is wide open for them because they can have direct access to their fans. And there are so many Facebook social media, for all of its pluses and minuses, certainly allows fans to get attracted, and then an opportunity for the authors, the narrators, the production companies to see what the fans are talking about, what they're requesting. And so I think it can save you so much guesswork. Like you want to write a story, of course, that's authentic, and you want to have a performance that is truthful and honest and beautiful. But at the same time, there are tropes in romance. People like happily ever afters. That's why there's an acronym, HEA.
Yeah.
people, right? I mean, there are things that people want and expect from their escapist entertainment. And so I think to kind of take out all the guesswork, that's all available to them now. And they can really just kind of get right to the fans themselves, work with professionals who have been in the industry. So it's not just somebody that you're hiring in the middle of nowhere that you have no idea if they're even going to give you your files on time or what the quality of the audio is going to be.
Yeah.
You can go to the trusted source to give you the same quality that they give to publishers to your indie project. It's extraordinary. It really is.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, especially now that we have you guys on like social media and we can find you guys. I love how I would wonder like how much has this changed for you where like yourself can like
Oh, you
post
mean
like,
the
hey, I
terror?
just did this great,
The
or just
terror
like
that I
posting
have
when new
about social media?
audiobooks.
The terror where I'm like, no, I
The
came
terror.
into a booth so I didn't have to talk to anybody.
And now you have to talk
Now
because
I
we were
have to
like,
talk to
Carly.
people, and now you have to like put out cute videos. Who has the time? There are so many narrators who are brilliant. It looks like it takes them 5 seconds to put together a fabulous, a little kooky, a little eccentric something video. And maybe it takes them an hour to edit, produce, whatever. It would probably take me 12 days to do. I'm like, what does this button do?
Like, what
I
do
don't know how they do it. They make it look so effortless and they're so good at it. And maybe because they're younger, they're just who they are. It's probably a combination of all those things. They have an interest in it, a passion for it. They feel like they can speak directly to people. I think there is a push because there is a lot of fear that, the AI presence, which a lot of voice actors just in general, not just for audiobooks, but like all your commercials, all of your promos, stealing your voice. I think that has been out there for a while, but the technology is really caught up to sort of where we are, where it's really possible. And there are small little things happening here and there. And so I think there is a push, especially because, our names used to not even be on the cover of the audiobook title, things like that. And we're not always tagged when somebody's doing a promotion for their book. They don't always put you as the narrator. There's no real promotion that happens, or it's very rare that when I'm cast by a publisher that I'm asked to do additional promotional work for the audio version. And so I think as narrators, we've always sort of been in the background. We would only go by the voice. But I think as times change, people want to see what's your background? Where did you come from? Like, how do you feel about this work? And, you spoke about Kennedy Ryan, right? Is that who you had said? I think that there is a big push to get women of color and all sorts of, different stories that previously weren't told because the gatekeepers weren't open to those kinds of things, or whatever the reasons are. As culture changes, we're now really trying to push past all of that and make it authentic. It's funny. I was talking to another voiceover artist last week, and we were sort of laughing and saying how crazy the industry has changed. But I used to sit in the waiting rooms when we were in waiting rooms for things, and like people would talk and their voices most of the time did not match what their outward appearance you would expect them to be. And I would speak to a guy and he was like, yeah, I always get cast for like urban and whatever those kinds of stereotype things mean. And he looked like he was sort of a mixed race, but probably never any of the things that he was cast for, but simply because of where his voice sat. And I think that there is a big shift to having a little more authenticity, to opening the doors for the people who are of those things, that you shouldn't sound like a certain something. You just are who you are. So if you are who you are and that's what you sound like, then people can open their minds to say, oh, somebody who looks like that can also sound like that, as opposed to perpetuating stereotypes for what things were. And I think a lot of that, probably developed over time because it was easier. They're working on really tight deadlines. I'm sure some of it might have been for more negative reasons. But I think a lot of times people are just good people, and, a lot of mistakes were being made. So I think the movement of indie artists, I think the sort of opportunity to see what your narrators look like, to have them get behind their work, I think sort of all of those kinds of things happening at the same time is really opening up to hear so many kinds of stories and from so many different kinds of people. It's remarkable. And it's exciting,
It is.
because you don't have to be afraid of who you are, because it might prevent you from getting a job. It actually might just open you up to getting work that maybe you didn't know you could have. And so I think embracing that is the better choice than being scared by it.
Yeah, and definitely. And one of the things that I have noticed, especially now that audiobook listeners as a group,
Yes.
us as readers or audiobook listeners, I should say, have grown bigger and bigger and bigger, it seems like the push and the desire to get your audios as quickly as possible
Oh my
has
God, yes.
increased. So, like, how was that change your recording
Stressful.
process from when you first started to when you are to currently right now? Do you feel like you have to like maximize your time so you can get all these finished per hours and you get the project out a lot quicker? How has
Oh my
that
goodness.
affected your recording process?
You are asking the question that every narrator I know is like chokehold right now on their throats, because they're like, yes, the production times are getting tighter when we get the books, especially because a lot of indie authors are sometimes working on it right until the last second. So we don't even get, I used to get like tons of time to prep. I would get the script. I'd have a couple of weeks. I could do like 10 pages a night and, be really super leisurely about it. And those times are long gone. And so what's becoming more and more important, I'm like, are there any accents? What's my tone? Who do I got to look out for? What kind of pronunciations? Please don't give me crazy pronouncing names. Or if you do, just please provide a guide. Just make life easier for me. You're giving me the tightest of tightest schedules. And I'm trying to coordinate with like a co-narrator, because most romance these days are with your co-narrator or multiple voices. Please give me a little bit of help here to make sure that I'm being authentic to your work. So I would definitely say schedules are getting tighter. Production experiences are getting more complicated, and people are trying to expand the genre to do, like duet style or, all these different kinds of things. And those are awesome, but they're just a lot more on the production side to get together. And so hands down, the more you are on the mic, the more you are working, the better, more efficient you can be. You can only talk for so many hours during a day, which means you're only getting through so many projects. So the more efficient you can be, the more you can like tighten what your prep time is and your understanding of your genre and all that kind of work, the better. I used to like add color. I would like create colors for characters, and like maybe I would think of like what the playlist would be. And I don't have to do that anymore because I've narrated so many books, but also I don't have the time. And I don't know that it serviced the book in the same way as it used to. And as I was learning how to go from beginning to end to create the story, to understand the melody in a sentence, those kinds of things. I needed it back then. I don't need it as much now. But no, it's always stressful. And then every narrator's like, they happen to do construction next to my house on this day.
I get it.
For 5 hours. How could you have that many leaves to blow? There's not that many.
Because audiobook listeners, they will put that in the reviews, like, why did I hear like a lawnmower going through the background of like chapter da da da?
Because that poor narrator was under a terrible deadline and they didn't have a choice. They had to get it done, and they really hoped whoever they hired for an engineer, or they were doing themselves, that it would be able to, get it out, and they weren't able to. That's why that happened. Yeah.
And also with so many, like you mentioned, duet, full cast, dual narration, do you have a preferred one that you like, without a genre in the mix, but do you have a preferred one that you like always are like, yes, I love doing this type of narration?
I will tell you that anytime I have been able to get into a studio with other actors, it's the best. If I'm, if it's just the two of us, or there's a full cast, or whatever it is, that is the best, hands down. Art doesn't live in a vacuum. If you can work off of somebody else, feel their energy, I just feel like it elevates everything. So those moments are rarer and rarer because it's so expensive to get into a studio. Everybody's schedules are so crazy. The quality of a home studio these days is fantastic. You don't really need it. So even the multicast projects that I've done since we've been, in a pandemic, they're all done, through technology. Like, I'm just hearing people, 1,000 people on my headphones. So it's extraordinary how that happens. But nothing really beats being in a studio. I will tell you the absolute best project that I have ever worked on was an Audible Originals production of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott.
I think I listened to that one. I listened to that version. It was recent too, right?
It was recent, yes.
Yeah, I did.
I played Amy March. It was a dream come true. It was an absolute dream come true. We were in the studio, all the March sisters playing off of each other. Lauren Fortgang, who played Jo, was like painting my nails. She was like being an older sister, kind of doing fun little things like that. I happened to be pregnant with my daughter at the time. And so to know that like I was doing this unbelievable project while, creating a life was, I think I cried probably every day, but that might also been like pregnancy hormones.
Yeah.
Maybe both, because I think other people cried and they weren't pregnant. So it's probably all of the above. And I got to work with like journeyman actors from New York City who've been in New York City theater, for idols of mine. It was unbelievably incredible and so special. But those things happen once in a blue moon, So when they happen, it's really special and lovely and wonderful. And that's not to say I don't enjoy this sort of like everyday work that I do, because I do. But those things are just on another level when they happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and listeners too. Like, I feel like the more I get with full cast, and like, I don't think I listened to duet until about a year ago, and I was like, oh, like
yeah.
it keeps on evolving, and then there's like some like Cara Stone's Audible Originals are like almost like plays, and like now Audible's doing like full on plays.
I know.
Or stand-up comedy just completely in audio.
I know.
It's like we're almost like encapsulating. It's like audiobooks have become so much more than just books.
It's
just
so
reading,
exciting.
just like translating a book.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's just expanding the medium, expanding like what's possible in the art that you can create. So many like interesting projects, and I feel like they just try so many different kinds of things. I got cast in something, and I don't think I'm allowed to say what it is, but it's going to be I think it's a serial. I was in episodes 1 and 3, I think, and that's coming out soon. And it was unlike anything that I had ever experienced before. It was kind of like a play. It was kind of journalistic. It was kind of really like intangible. It had music. I had never experienced anything like it before. And it was so exciting. And I just had a tiny little part, you know? So I know they're doing stuff all the time and it's exciting to be a part of. I know, it's so
I
fun.
know.
That kind of stuff is
It's
so fun.
just so cool as a listener seeing like with Audible, like audiobooks becoming more accessible, more easy to get in people's hands, like with different services like Chirp, Libro FM, and all the different platforms that you can now get, especially libraries are beefing up their audiobook catalog. I love that it's just getting more people into reading, allowing different types of stories to be told. It's just an amazing
It
time
is. You know, it's
overall.
interesting, but you think about that, and on the business side, when publishers, and obviously indie authors have an entirely different process, but let's use publishers since they're the more traditional route. When they would write their audio version, they would hold on to the rights for like 10 years. And they would then decide whether or not they were even going to do audio. And sometimes they wouldn't even include that it could go to libraries in the audio. So your access to the work itself was limited simply by the design of the business. And I think the more demand there is for them, so that's why fans are, they're the only reason we exist. Because the people buying them are saying to the industry, hello, there's a business here. We want to hear more of it. And we want to hear all of it. So if the first in the series was made into an audiobook, but this all the way up to the seventh wasn't, but there are fans out there, we need to hear those voices because that's it's all business. It's all about money, sadly. And so, yeah, the fact that there are so many fans out there, it's just extraordinary. My husband's always like, I wonder if anybody, like if we go to like a bookstore or something like that.
Would
Or
someone recognize your voice?
yes, yes. It's never happened. I can't imagine that it would, but he says that every once in a while and it always embarrasses me. I'm always like, no, stop.
That's so funny. And then I also want to touch on a little bit because you do narrate under CJ Bloom.
Yes, I
And
do.
for everyone watching, I did talk to Carly and we are allowed to talk
Yes.
about this, so no one gets too angry. But why is the difference in creating a pen name and what's the difference between the two?
So honestly, there is no difference except that what's hysterical is sometimes there are fans who hate CJ, who hate Carly
Really?
Robbins. I'll give CJ
Would
Bloom a
love
really
CJ.
awesome.
That's so awkward.
I'll show you, like, it's, I don't know. I can't explain it. People say, I don't know, maybe they were in a bad mood or something. I don't know. I don't get it. So at the time when I started narrating audiobooks, I was never embarrassed by sex or romance or intimate scenes or any of that kind of stuff. I certainly don't feel comfortable if there is violence involved or things like that. So that's on a separate subject. But in general, if we're always talking about the fun, sexy times that everybody is into, I was never prudish or upset about it. I was always like, yeah, let's make this happen.
Yeah.
But I had heard from people in the industry that if you were also a voiceover artist or you wanted to do children's stuff, that was frowned upon or looked down upon. And so that you really needed to keep those identities separate should something ever come up as a conflict and somebody wouldn't want to narrate or wouldn't want to hire you to narrate because you had some sexy time books and they felt that didn't fit with the brand of, like, I don't know, Crayola or something. I use that because I was the voice of Bluetiful. Like the blue
Really?
Crayola. I did I did I think like 3 or 4 commercials with her. And anyway, that's why it came to my head. But anyway, I'm not sure that that's the case anymore. But and I'm not sure that was the case when I was given the advice, but it was certainly something that people feared. The same way, like I said, people feared showing their image or sort of being honest about perhaps their gender identity or their sexual identity or their racial background or their religion. All of these things that you feel stress or anxiety about revealing because you don't know how it's going to be received means that you're not living as your authentic self, and that's very sad. So I think it probably came from the same place. And so I was like, sure, I'll come up with another name. Because I was like, why do I'm not going to fight like this big demon, whatever.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll come up with another name. Let's have fun. So it's my name, Carly. Joelle is my middle name, so CJ. And then Bloom is my mother's maiden name. And I don't use it for passwords, so you can't steal my identity, people. I don't do it.
That'll be the easiest password. Like, let me just try her pen name.
Bloom.
CJ Bloom.
Bloom. But I felt like Bloom sort of had like a Georgia O'Keeffe, like, you know, blossoming sexual something sort of pretty flower, birds and the bees kind of feel to it. And so that's why I chose it. But I am not secretive about it. I don't have any shame doing those kinds of things. And now I just get some most of the time I get requested from either person, but I've done romance under Carly and romance under CJ. I've done erotica under Carly and erotica under CJ. So I'm not really sure why sometimes I get requested under one name or another. I don't know. Maybe that's because that was what that, author listened to and liked my voice for that or something. And there are some times when I get hired, like I'm doing a series currently for Chloe Liese, the Bergman brothers. Have you listened to it? Oh, she is a fantastic writer. Oh my goodness. And when I told her my name, because I think I'm doing it under CJ Bloom, and so that must have been, I'm doing it under CJ Bloom, but I told her my name, Carly Rob, in our correspondence, because I had some questions about pronunciation or whatever in the beginning, and now we have a little bit of an email relationship or a social media relationship, and I love her books so much, so I'm happy to promote them and say when I've got a release coming out. And she was like, "You're Carly Robbins?" And she was like, "You did the Kiss Quotient. I'm such good friends with Helen, and I can't believe you're doing my books too." And somehow she listened to my sample because she chose me. I had to audition for it, and again, didn't know I was the same person.
I don't know why I'm laughing. I didn't know until you told me. I was like, "Wait, you are?" I just I never try to figure that stuff out. So I'm like,
I know. Some people do. They become obsessive.
Some people
they
want
somehow
to
have
figure
to
it out.
I'm like, I don't know why. Can't you just?
I'm like, I don't care. Is the audio good? That's all I need.
Anyway, so that's the story behind that. I could care less. Who knows? It's fun to feel like your alter ego people like more than your regular one for whatever reason.
You just cracked me up when you said some people hate CJ Bloom, but then they don't realize that it's you. So I'm like, wait, do you just hate both? Or but you love Carly?
Reverse. Yeah, they don't. They love CJ and they hate Carly. I don't know what to tell you.
And I also wanted to touch on a point that you made earlier about AI and text-to-speech and those technologies improving. I know we mentioned earlier that the technology is getting better and better. Yeah. You're starting to see. I know there was an article that predicted hey, it would completely supplant human narrators. And I wanted your whole what are your thoughts on that article or that whole discussion that's going on?
I think anytime we are talking about replacing a human with a machine, a level of sensitivity is always warranted.
I know.
Whether it's in automated auto industry, I don't know, could that have completely decimated entire cities? I think that there is a level. I think there are always pros and cons when technology comes. There are jobs that will be created that we couldn't even imagine will exist because the technology has then allowed it for. Like, who would have thought that there would be an app store? Like, that was an afterthought, from Apple. They were like, yeah, we'll just have an app store. And then it created its own entire industry. Who would have thought video games on your phone would be a thing as opposed to a console? So I don't think that there's any way that we can predict if AI becomes something, whatever that means, because I don't know what that means, that there won't also be a space for all of us. And I think that those who don't embrace the change and figure out how they can find their place in it tend to get left behind because you stay stagnant. You're not malleable. I mean, there were silent movie artists that they went to voice and they had terrible voices and didn't adapt to that new medium, and they all stopped working. You hear those stories in the birth of the movie industry. So I think all of us in every industry, it's going to change. And it wouldn't change if it was doing fine. But there's something that's obviously moving it in a direction where it needs to change. So then we have to change with it. I'm obviously worried that my work may lessen, but I don't know that it will. I just don't know.
Mhm.
So I think I think for me, a healthy dose of, I got to stay on top of this. I got to hear how the industry is working. I find those, especially that article that was written, in my opinion, without a lot of information about how the audiobook industry really works. They were throwing out numbers of how much audiobook narrators make, which was not accurate. There was a lot of inaccuracy. It was clearly written by someone who I don't know where they got their information from, but it was not right.
Mhm.
And so it was very inflammatory, which is upsetting because it could have been something very thoughtful and interesting to engage. How can we have this dynamic? Um, I'm not sure where it's going to go. I think it would be very hard to have an authentic performance from AI to get humor, to get subtle changes in tone. I don't say the same line when I make a mistake. I don't say it the same way twice.
Mhm.
But that's not to say that there's not a group of people that don't want a full-fledged performance like that. Maybe they enjoy a more monotone, reading. So I think maybe I'll never get cast in those kinds of jobs, but maybe that's okay. There's enough work in this other realm that I can be okay with. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I think if we close our minds down and just say, absolutely not, no, I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. I don't know that that's the right solution, but are there ways that, like with our union, with our fans, that people can recognize that there is a distinction? So we're having a conversation about it. I think that's the healthier way to go. I don't
Yeah,
know,
and
right? It's
I
complicated.
completely agree. I think for improving text to speech, I think of it more of like a accessibility for authors who can't translate
Right.
their books into audio, or for people who have hard of like trouble seeing. It's very hard for them to read. At least improving that experience will help get people getting into more reading, which help both book sales, indie book sales. And I think it's just like you said, it's going to change the way the industry is structured, but I don't necessarily think you're still going to have those people who love audiobooks that will 100% go like, no, I don't want monotone. I
Yeah.
want to hear the story
The full
acted and brought
performance.
to life.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we used to have, what did they used to say? Like sort of the change of how television has gotten,
Hmm.
where, people would tune into like Thursday nights on NBC, there would be like 50 million people or 40 million, like Super Bowl numbers, which happens once
Hmm.
a year. Um, they would have 30 million plus viewers. Television is now, if you get a few million, you're
You're
lucky
a
for your
hit.
show. If you get a cult following, you could still get your show produced for numbers less than that. So I just think that we're becoming more niche. People are looking for something specific for the kind of art that they want to hear. And we're just sort of at the beginning stages of understanding how this all might work together. But I think to be insensitive, to not talk about it, and to not then have labels that this was AI or that we're not highlighting our performers, I think does a disservice to everyone. And I think that's part of potentially one of the elements why many more narrators are like, I got to get my face out there. I got to show who I am so that people invest in me as a person. They invest in me as the personality. They're investing in my brand, whatever that means. I don't know that I have one, but I know people say that they only try, want to do this kinds of genres, and they do these kinds of things, whatever. I think I think people feel like if you're investing in me, then you're supporting me as the art. And then my name will always be attached to that. My name will always be on the review, or my name will always be associated with that, so that I'm getting the same kind of exposure. And maybe there's not as much room for just something that says narrated by AI.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for my final question,
Yes.
which
Tell me.
should be a fun one, I'll give
Do
you
it.
two avenues that you can go down. You
Okay.
can either share some upcoming projects that you're excited about, or you can share some of your favorite audiobooks. They don't have to be romance,
Got
they
it.
can be any genre, but I will let you choose your own adventure with this question.
It's a great question. However, the future stuff, I don't really think I'm allowed to talk about them.
That's what I was like. Let me give you a choice.
Yeah, so that gets complicated. But that was something else that's changed is like we book up now, like crazy. Like I have things in like October and November. Nuts.
Oh, wow.
I know. So like all of a sudden my husband's like, we gotta be up more on like our vacation stuff because otherwise all of a sudden I look and I'm like,
you get booked.
I booked every week. We can't go anywhere this year. Okay. So I love romance. I love the fans of romance, hands down. However, you, as an actor, you want to do everything. You want to do mysteries. You want to do young adult. You want to do fiction. You want to do, sort of like the upcoming titles and not things that came out a couple of years ago that finally get around to you. So there's, I don't know of any actor that doesn't want to sort of do everything. And I'm certainly in that camp. You want to keep your acting, bones healthy, and you want to try all different kinds of narrating styles and writing styles and genres. So I'll tell you a couple of my favorite romance. So I had mentioned the Bergman Brothers series, which I loved. I was able to narrate Anne of Manhattan. Did you listen to this? It's sort of like reimagining, so maybe a little bit like fanfic, but a reimagining of Anne of Green Gables, which I think was a lot of people's first forays into romance. Even though it would obviously, there was no sex in it.
It's kind of like Gilbert. It has a love story at the core of it too.
Totally. Well, so this one was the retelling, but if she lived in Manhattan, and it was extraordinary, and I could not have been more excited to have been cast to narrate that. So it was called Anne of Manhattan, and it's a great listen. So hands down. The Kiss Quotient, which I think was a total surprise to me when it had its like whirlwind year of being on every list everywhere. That was a complete shock, surprise. I could never have predicted it. That author is lovely. Do you hear the dog in the background? She's all of a sudden like, you've been talking too long. Shut your mouth.
Like I need attention now.
I need to pay attention to me. I did one of those Audible Originals, American Girl. That was super awesome. That was more like thriller and fiction. And that was like a fully collaborated like experience. CJ did, the one LJ Shen book that I did was Broken Night. That was awesome. That was also a multicast. I did that one as CJ. Surprisingly, I had to carry the whole book. Jacob Morgan comes on for 5 seconds and people are like, this is the best thing in the whole world.
Not my whole narrating like the 9 hours plus of this book. Just like for the 5 seconds Jacob Morgan shows up.
Yep. That's the life of a female narrator. I did Mrs. Rochester's Ghost. I got to play, did you ever, Mrs. Rochester's Ghost, that was also a retelling. I got to play of Jane Eyre, the retelling of Jane Eyre, but like in a modern day. And I performed that one with Eva Kaminsky, who's actually a friend of mine. And she's an extraordinary actress. And, but I played the Mrs. Rochester role. So it was like very psychotic. She was unhinged. It was such a wild ride to narrate. But Eva does like the heavy lifting for the book. That was awesome. I think you and I connected because one of your favorite authors is Rebecca Yarros, and she is mine as well. Oh my God.
She can make you cry like a baby.
Knife in and like pulls it out and you're like gushing blood. The first one I did for her, it was technically YA because they were teenagers, was Full Measures. And I did that one a very long time ago and then didn't get cast in anything for a while. And then all of a sudden I started getting that I'm finishing that series. And I have a couple of other ones that I've done with her. Oh, she is sensational. Oh my goodness. Every time I get cast, I'm like, oh, buckle up, Buttercup, because we are about to go
tissues on the ready.
Tissues on the ready. Keep it in. Try and get through the page. Because it's going to be rough. I did one that kind of like balances like the women's fiction, adulting, Liz Talley. It was surprisingly emotional. All really strong female characters in the lead. people really trying to figure out like their messy lives, dealing with some, childhood trauma, how to move forward, put themselves back together, but in like a really like truthful, honest way. I was surprised when I read it. I was like, that was a thing. I did one, Rachel Lynn Solomon, also a YA, to come up just like to round out some YA versus like adult stuff. We can't keep meeting like this. A young woman with a lot of like really emotional, like a really alive emotional life as a youngster. And same with her boy interest. And so it was complicated and really messy, and they were very truthful with their feelings, and it just came from such an honest place. That one I really, really, really enjoyed. I know she gets a lot of notice for a lot of her adult contemporaries, but her YA, I was felt really, really lucky and grateful that I got to narrate that one. I could go on and on. I mean, you're like, and then you mention when you're like, oh yeah, I love that one, and then you're like, oh yeah, I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
They're just awesome. It's the best job in the entire world.
But thank you, Carly, so much for coming on my
Thank
channel.
you.
For everyone watching, I will leave all of Carly's social media links down below, as well as a link to our Audible page, so you can listen to all her audiobooks under CJ Bloom or as Carly. You pick your choice. You won't go wrong either
You
way.
won't go wrong. And I'm telling you, I'm getting better at the social media thing. I'm posting when things are really awesome, and I'm trying to get better about staying in touch because I love to hear from all of you guys. You're the reason why we exist in our business. So thank you so much. This was incredibly fun, and thank you for inviting me on and having me. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you again, and thank you guys again for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys with a brand new video. Bye, everyone.